Hey friends, welcome back to Jess Writes a Book. I am Jess, and today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. Instead of talking about what I've been writing, we're going to be talking about what I've been reading. Okay, so today is December 22nd. We are a week away from the end of the year, and so I thought that I would go ahead and do my reading wrap-up for the year. Typically, these wrap-ups look pretty different. I will go through stats and I've done years where I have gone through every book I've read or every book I've DNF'd or what my five-star reads were for the year. And we are going to do a little bit of that, but typically I have those videos all kind of separate. This video is going to be a little bit of an amalgamation of all of those things because my reading year has looked pretty different this year. So my channel over the past year has gone through kind of a transformation. I started off YouTube as a booktube channel. I did obviously book content, reading content, along with my vlogs. And last year I made the switch over to AuthorTube as I started writing more, and that transformation and that focus on writing has absolutely made a huge difference in my reading. I have not read as much this year as I have in past years at all. And even though, again, this is now a AuthorTube channel focusing on my writing, I did still want to do at least one video talking about my reading, because obviously this is my channel. I'm a reader. I love to read. I think as writers we consume books a lot, whether they're craft books or comp books for whatever we're writing. I think in general writers are just natural readers and vice versa. We're just lovers of the written word, so we tend to read a lot, and so I think that these two things kind of go hand in hand. And again, this channel for me is about sharing all the parts of my life, and reading, as you can see behind me from these shelves, and there's another one over here that you can't see, is a huge part of my life. So I wanted to go ahead and do at least one video talking about my reading. So like I said, my reading this year has definitely looked a lot different than it has in past years. Previously when I was on BookTube, and I think a lot of that was about being on BookTube and kind of the pressures that come along with that and in the number of books that you're reading. But this year there have been a lot of changes. My writing, my husband's health has changed this year, which has affected a lot of things. I'm no longer working from home, which has had a big effect on things. And just all these different things have come into play and have affected the amount of books I've read, the format of the books I've read, my book reviews, and just kind of how I approach reading in general. So I think I'm going to break down this video into a few different sections. We're going to talk about what my 2025 goals were, and then we're going to talk about what I actually accomplished in 2025. That's where we'll talk a little bit about the books that I've read, what 5-star books I had, what DNFs I had. And then we're also going to talk about, again, how my writing has kind of affected my reading. And then we'll talk a little bit about motivation and burnout and just like pressure and that kind of thing. And then we will go ahead and talk a little bit about stats and the types of books that I read and things like that. So yeah, let's jump right in. So the first thing we're going to talk about are what my goals were for 2025 when it comes to reading. If you see me looking off to the side, it's because I have my laptop set up over here with my Goodreads open so that I can see exactly what I have read and what my goal was and all the things. So my original goal, typically for me, I will set a few different goals. I will have my general number goal, how many books I want to read in a year. I do the Goodreads reading challenge and set it up every year. So this year my goal is 100 books. That is typically the same goal. I think I've set my goal at 100 books every year for probably the past 5 years at least. Typically I surpass that by a good margin. I think I've usually typically hit anywhere from 120 to 140 books. So this year I did the same. I set it at 100 books. And then usually I also have some other goals as well. Sometimes I will have goals as far as reading my physical TBR, all of the books that are on, you can't see the shelf, there's a shelf over here. There are 3 shelves of fiction books or fiction novels that I have not read. And so I usually have some kind of goal to read a specific number of books on my physical, TBR. I believe my goal this year was to read at least 1 book per month that I actually owned. And then I also have a book down below, or not a book, but a shelf down below of craft books. So one of my goals this year was to read 1 craft book per month. Then I also have a bunch of nonfiction books that I have received ARCs of that I wanted to read. So my goal was 100 books per month, to read one book from my physical TBR per month, read one nonfiction book per month. And then usually I try to do kind of like seasonal, I guess, reading. I try to read queer books like all year round, but I definitely usually set my entire TBR will be queer books in June for sure, and then I try to read books from the authors of color, and again I try to focus on nonfiction books, and come fall I try to focus on like a fall TBR, and then like a winter or holiday TBR. Gabby reads, I will link her channel down below. She does Summerween and Winterween, which are both like thriller, spooky-ish kind of reading challenges. I always participate in those, so those are kind of goals as well. So those are some of the goals that I always have, also to participate in those as well. I also usually set some kind of goal of trying to finish a specific series. So the book tracker that I use, I will put a link to the tracker down below. I forget who it is that created the tracker itself. I found it on like a Googled reading tracker, and that one came up. So I forget who it is that actually created it. I did not create it, but it says it in the actual Google Doc itself, so I'll link that down below. This is one that I've been using for 2 or 3 years now, and it actually has a tab for like ultimate series tracker, and so I have that filled out with all the series that I either want to read or have started, and I try to get through at least a few of those per year. Some of these series are pretty long, but I do try to do that as well. So those are some of the goals that I typically have every year. So now let's talk about how I did on those goals this year, which spoiler, not great. So, like I said, the first goal that I had was to read 100 books this year. And as of right now, December 22nd, we are sitting at 80 books read. That is a fair bit less than what I typically read. Like I said, I usually read between 120 to 140 books. This year I read 80, which, given everything that I have done this year, given all the things that have happened in my personal life this year, 80 books is still very good. I'm not discounting that. It wasn't a horrible reading year by any means, but definitely wasn't on par with what I usually do. So something else that I just realized as I was kind of getting ready for this video is that I don't think I think that these 2 books right here, Scythe and Thunderhead, are the only 2 physical books that I read in the entire year. I was looking through the list, and all of the books are either ebooks or audiobooks, and these are the only 2 that I have read all year. I have a few more sitting on my nightstand, but I have not finished them. These are the only 2 that I have actually finished, and these were rereads as well in 2025. That is not normal for me. In previous years, I have been much more of a physical reader. I love reading the books on my shelves. I love reading library books. This year, I leaned heavily into Kindle and heavily into audiobooks, which is pretty typical. I do usually read listen to a lot of audiobooks because I listen to them on my commute to and from work. But I've never had a year where I didn't read any physical books. That was a really big surprise to me when I realized that. Then as far as my other goals, such as reading 1 book a month from my physical TBR, that did not happen because I didn't read any physical books. All of the books that were sitting on those 3 shelves that needed to be read are still sitting there. And actually I've acquired some more because I was signed up for Book of the Month and OwlCrate for the first few months of the year. So I actually acquired more that are now sitting on those shelves that I have not read. And then I did, I think the only craft book I actually finished was a reread of Save the Cat, so I did not hit that goal either. I have started a few others. Actually, that's not true. I did finish Romancing the Beat, but that was an ebook, not a physical. I don't have a physical copy of that, although I do want to get one. So I read Save the Cat, I read Romancing the Beat. I started The Anatomy of Story, but I haven't finished it. And then I'm also reading Bird by Bird by Anne Lamott, but I haven't finished that either. That is a physical book, but I haven't finished it. So yeah, I didn't hit that goal either. And then what else? To be fully honest, I honestly didn't fully fill in my reading tracker this year, so I don't have all of the stats that I would typically have. Typically, in these videos, I could tell you how many books I read, like by authors of color, how many books were thrillers or romances or fantasy, etc. Can't do that this year because I didn't really fill out that tracker. I think a majority of the books I read were probably romances. I typically read either a lot of romance or a lot of thrillers. And then some years I lean heavily into like fantasy. I don't know that this was a huge fantasy year. But since I can't give you those stats, I thought that towards the end, in the stat section that I had, I will tell you a little bit more about some of the specific books that I did read. And now that we talked about the goals that I didn't hit, let's talk about why. So the number one reason why I didn't hit all those goals is because of my writing. Again, I shifted to AuthorTube this year, and I have been focusing very heavily on my writing. In previous years, I said that I was going to focus on my writing, and then I did not. I would write pretty good for like the first month of the year, in January, and then I would fall off and I wouldn't write for months at a time. That did not happen this year. This has been, I kind of traded one thing for another. I'm going to have a separate video talking about my writing year, so I won't go too much into detail about that here, but I have finished several drafts. I think at least 4 drafts, first drafts. This year I've written over 100,000 words. I have written serialized stories and started editing my books, and I've had so many ideas and spent months brainstorming and plotting and outlining and doing research. And I did the Rough Draft Challenge 3 times this year. So that, again, I kind of traded my reading time traded my reading time and what allowed me to read 120, 140 books in a year for writing time, which allowed me to write several first drafts in the year. So that is the biggest thing that's affected my writing, or reading, I should say. The second thing is that my husband's health changed this year, especially in the latter half of the year. We've had a lot more doctor's appointments this year. He was just in the hospital for a week. We knew that his eventual need for dialysis was coming up. We've traveled to Arizona a couple of times. So all of those things in my personal life have also affected my reading. Again, a couple of years ago, I was working from home and my workload wasn't as heavy, so I was able to read more. I was working from home, so I wasn't being as interrupted as often as I am now, being in office with employees coming in. So I was consuming more audiobooks. And I'm still doing that, but definitely not as much as in previous years. And again, the biggest shift was that I didn't read basically any physical books, and all my books were either audio or ebook because I was listening to them on, to and from work, and probably reading on my lunch, my ebooks on my lunch and everything. So those were the 2 big things that affected my reading, like I said. So now let's talk about motivation and burnout and pressure. Like I said, I guess this probably could have gone hand in hand with the last segment, but I think another big factor in my reading was that, again, I'm not on AuthorTube anymore. I was very heavily into AuthorTube, not just in my own content, but in my consumption of YouTube. It was very heavily AuthorTube a couple of years ago. I mean, not AuthorTube, BookTube a couple of years ago. All of the content I was consuming was booktubers, and so I was constantly getting recommendations for books. That was the kind of content I was putting out. There was this constant pressure to read. I was on NetGalley getting tons of ARCs every month, and way more than I should have been. There was a point also from 2020 to about 2024 where I was also being sent ARCs from publishers. I was being sent physical ARCs, directly to my house from publishers, and that was a huge honor. But again, I felt obligated then to read those books after I had been sent them for free with the expectation of a review. I was working on street teams, not working, but part of street teams for a time. I was very consistent in my Goodreads reviews, and at one point in 2019 or 20, I had a blog where I was posting book reviews. So again, all of those things contributed to the number of books that I was reading, contributed to the pressure to read books, to keep up with all the other author tubers in my space, the author tubers that I keep saying author tubers, book tubers, who I was consuming, and trying to keep up with them, and feeling that pressure and the comparison. And so all of that played a huge part in why I was reading so much in those years. I was reading 12 to 14 books per month. There was also different challenges that I was participating in, and I feel like I want to say that those aren't as prevalent now as they used to be on YouTube. But again, maybe it's just because I'm not really in that space anymore, that I don't really know about them anymore. There are still a couple of booktubers that I follow. Olivia Reads Latte is one that I follow. I don't watch her videos as much as I used to, but I really love her content. Who else do I still watch? Chandler Ainsley, I still watch her. Brogan Tate, she does more lifestyle, but occasionally she'll do like a reading vlog or something. I follow her as well. And I forget who else, but I'll look through my subscriptions, and any other booktubers that I still follow I will link down below, because those are like my tried and true that I really enjoy. And so yeah, making the switch to AuthorTube and not having that kind of external pressure from other booktubers, and like that comparison obviously was like a huge factor in my not reading as much this year. I don't really have stats other than the fact that I read 80 books to give you guys, because I didn't fully fill out that reading tracker. I'm gonna pull up what I did fill out. I think I filled out like January through March, maybe April, and then I started to fill out some of December. So I'm just gonna take a quick kind of glance at it and just give you an idea of what for the months that I do have stats. So it looks like in January I read 8 books, in February I read 4, in March I read 9 books, April I read 6, May I read 16 books. I definitely read a lot during the summer. I love sitting outside when it's not quite as cold anymore, in the early mornings before it gets too hot, and reading, so I think that contributes a lot to those numbers. Let's see. This is not fully accurate. Or actually, that's not even accurate at all, so never mind. But yeah, that gives you an idea. So my average is kind of like between 6 and 8 books a month, which isn't bad at all. But again, previously I was reading like 14 books a month, so I kind of cut that almost in half, So going back, I'm going to go through my Goodreads and just kind of talk about some of the standout books that I had this year, since I don't really have actual stats. Hopefully, I'm really hoping to be better about that in 2026 and be able to come and have actual full stats when I do this video next year. Just some kind of standout things from just looking over my overall Goodreads. The first book I read in the year was Beg, Borrow, or Steal by Sarah Adams, which was a contemporary romance, which I didn't even realize at the time that is like the sequel. It's either the second or third book in the series. It's not even the first book, and I haven't read the first book. I didn't realize it until after I had read the book. I did read a lot of nonfiction this year, which isn't surprising. I do like reading nonfiction. I like historical fiction, or not historical fiction, but I like historical nonfiction. So I read The Radium Girls by Kate Moore in January, and that was a really good read. It was very sad. It made me really mad, but it was very good. Blood Over Brighthaven by Emma Long or Wang, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but was a 5-star read. It was one of my favorite books of the year, and one that I definitely need to go out and buy. Sorry about that, guys. My phone battery died, so I had to give it a chance to charge before I could keep going. I think the last thing I was talking about was Sunrise on the Reaping. I had reread all of the Hunger Games books before Sunrise on the Reaping, and that book honestly was so good. It was probably my favorite book of the year. Broke me. I cried so much reading that book. A lot of people complained, saying that it was a lot of like fan service and too much of bringing in old characters, but honestly, that's what I loved about it. I mean, it's a prequel. Like, to me, I expected it to be that way. I went in expecting to see all of those characters from, especially from the later two books. To me, that was kind of the whole point. And so I don't really understand people being upset about that. That's what made the book for me, was getting to see all those little characters and how they came together, and just the trajectory of everything, and all the little tie-ins, and like Easter eggs, and I loved all of it, so much of it. And I can't wait for the movie next year. I read maybe 2 or 3. What I love reading like autobiographies, especially ones that are read by the author, or like celebrity autobiographies read by the author. I love those. This year I think I read 2 or 3 of them, which actually now I'm thinking about a book that I'm pretty sure I read this year that I don't think is on here. But I did read In Gad We Trust by Josh Gad. I'm a big Disney lover. If you know me, you know I love Disney. I'm like Frozen, but I do love Olaf. But I think Josh Gad is hilarious, and I think he's a great human being. So I really loved his book. And then I also listened to let me find it here. Jeremy Renner's book, My Next Breath, was so good. It was so good that my husband actually listened to the audiobook. We listened to it together. I actually read that book twice. I read it myself in ebook format, and then we listened to it. My husband and I listened to it in the car, either on the way to California or on the way to Arizona, I don't remember. And my husband is not a reader in any capacity. He doesn't like consume books by reading them. He doesn't listen to audiobooks, anything. So for him to have listened to an audiobook is a huge thing. We're both big Marvel people, so that's probably why. But so good that I read it twice. I did also read A Clean Mess by Tiffany Jenkins, which is a like celebrity-ish autobiography as well. That one, I didn't really know her very well. I think I received an arc of that one, and that's why I read it. It was good. I didn't really have any like investment in her as a person. So while the story was good, it wasn't like life-changing or anything. Let's see what else. I did read, I don't know the name of the series, but the book is called A Song for the Wild Bill by Becky Chambers. I read the first 2 books. I think there's a 3rd one. So good. One of my favorite, or 2 of my favorite, I should say, books of this year. So good. They gave me just all of the feels, all of the like, I don't know, contemplative, like, just so many thoughts and so many good quotes in these books. And they were cozy, but also like thought-provoking. They kind of reminded me of like the Wild Robot movie a little bit. Just loved everything about them. The Night and the Moth was another like romantasy-ish book that I absolutely loved. I actually read it twice again because I liked it that much. I read it through ebook, and then I listened to the audiobook as well. I love any books that have like a sidekick or like a familiar or something like that has where the sidekick or the sidekick is like the comedic relief of the book. That is one of my favorite things, and The Night and the Moth has that, and it's a gargoyle, and the banter between the gargoyle and like the humans, favorite thing, like honestly one of my favorite books of the year. Atmosphere by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I haven't read anything by Taylor Jenkins Reid that I didn't like. I feel like it's just kind of polarizing. People either like love her or hate her, but I love her books. And Atmosphere had me literally sobbing in the shower. So very good. I really liked it. That's another one that I want to buy a physical copy of. I did read a few nonfiction books this year, but I didn't hit my goal of 1 a month like I wanted. I read 2 that are kind of in the same vein. Stiff: The Curious Lives of Human Cadavers by Marriott Roach, and then Working Stiff: 2 Years and the Making of a Medical Examiner by Judy Melanick. So both kind of in the same vein. I'm a huge like true crime podcast like junkie, and I like reading true crime books, consuming true crime content. And this is kind of in that same vein, more on the criminal investigation side of things, which I have an interest in also. So I read both of those. Those were both good. I reread the Scythe series. Like I said, I'm working on the 3rd book, The Thunderhead. I'm like 50% of the way through, but it's a pretty big book. Like that one book is like the size of both of these. And then there's the prequel. Is Gleanings? No, Gleanings is I have the book Gleanings on my to be read shelf. That is a like bind up of short stories set within the Scythe world. And then Neal Shusterman is currently writing the prequel to the series, which I'm super excited about. I really like these books. If you like science fiction, it's like dystopian and science fiction-y and a little bit of like religious elements kind of. I highly recommend these. They're very good. What else? Hazelthorn by C.G. Drews. Both of C.G. Drews' books have made my like 5-star reads both last year and this year. I read what was the other book last year? I can't remember what it was called now, but they came out with the book last year that I really liked, and then Hazelthorn this year was so good. I think they have more books coming out in 2026, which I'm really excited about. I also read both Aster, The Rise and Fall of American Fortune, and Vanderbilt, both by Anderson Cooper. I did not know that Anderson Cooper was related to the Vanderbilts. Had no idea, but I do really like Anderson Cooper. So he wrote and narrated both books, and I read both of those this year. I also read Migrations by Charlotte McConaughey. So I actually did read a lot more nonfiction than I thought I did. I just didn't read like one every month like I set out. So I still did it, just not in like the pattern that I had set out to. Terror at the Gates by Scarlett St. Clair was another really good one. I think that was a 4-star. The Starving Saints by Caitlin Starling was very good. Let's see what else. I recently read, during like fall time, I read A Witch's Guide to Magical Innkeeping by Sangu Mandana. They have written at least 2, I don't know if there's more, kind of cozy, magical realism, witchy kind of books. A Witch's Guide to Magical Innkeeping, and the other one is like the something witches coven or something like that. I wish my Goodreads was working properly. It's like the Intriguing Witches Coven or something like that. I can't think of what it's called now, and my Goodreads does not want to work. But they wrote at least 2 witchy, cozy, fantasy, like magical realism kind of books, and I really enjoyed A Witch's Guide to Innkeeping, and I want to read the other one. And then the book club for Troublesome Women I just finished, by Marie Bostwick. I just finished that in December. Very good. One of the things that I realized this year is that so many books have elements of like feminism and misogyny and the treatment of women and women's rights and like men abusing women and the murder of women and like just all the ways that women are taken advantage of. And that has been like a theme in a lot of the books that I have read this year. And while I do enjoy that, and I like when a book makes me mad, the more emotional a book makes me, the more I like it. Whether it's anger or sadness or fear or whatever, it's like the more emotion it draws out of me, the more I like a book. And so those types of books make me very angry, make me very sad. So I do typically like them, but I think it was maybe a little bit too much this year, given the climate that we were living in, especially in the US. So I think I might kind of try to take a break from those kinds of books, at least in early 2026. Because like I said, it was a common theme in a lot of the books that I read this year. And yeah, I think that is basically it. Those are the standout ones from all of the books that I read. Yeah, there you have it. There is a little wrap up of my reading for 2025. I think in 2026, I really want to pare back on my TBR, I guess. I constantly have a huge list of books that are out from the library. I can't pull it up right now because I am filming on my phone, but I routinely have between like 30 to 50 books out at the library at any given time, and I definitely I will return them. Like if there's somebody waiting in line behind me and I know I'm not gonna read it, then I will return it. But I typically have a large list of books between the library that I have out and Kindle Unlimited. Anytime I hear a book, I'm someone who, as soon as somebody recommends a book, I need to immediately go find it. And I immediately look on the library, or if I can't find the library, I will go look on Kindle Unlimited or whatever it is. And I end up with so many books that are just kind of sitting there like waiting for me to read. And every time I log onto my library app, it's overwhelming, especially because I have 2 library cards, one for Henderson and one for Las Vegas. And both cards, like the list of books that I have checked out from both cards, are all on one in the Libby app. So it has become kind of overwhelming. And it's very noticeable to me how many of those books I'm not getting to and how many of those books I'm not reading. And that kind of hurts a little bit and is demotivating, honestly. So I think I'm going to do a better job of not doing that next year. I think I'm going to set like not necessarily a TBR, but like a wish list of books that I want to read next year. And then I'm going to really try to just kind of slowly make my way through it. It's very often that I will read, or I will be in the middle of 4, 5, 6, 7, sometimes 10 books all at one time, across physical. I have 2, 3 books sitting on my nightstand that I'm in the middle of. Kindle Unlimited books from the library. I am the one place where I am still getting, that's not true. The 2 places that I'm still getting ARCs are NetGalley and Penguin Random House. There is a app for ARC readers through Penguin Random House where every month you can log in and see the audiobooks of different ARCs and you can read them ahead of time. And so every month I'm going in there and I have a huge list of books in there that need to be read. And it just all becomes super overwhelming and I don't know what to read, so I don't read. Was another factor this year. So I think this year I'm really going to try to, one, focus on NetGalley because, again, I'm being given the privilege of being given these books early, so I want to honor that and respect that. And I've also pared back a lot on the books that I'm requesting on NetGalley because before I would just request 80 books knowing that I was only going to read 30 of them. And I'm trying to really be better about that. So paring back on the NetGalley books, being intentional about reading those first, being intentional about reading my Penguin Random House books first. And any books that I come across that I want to read, I'm just going to add them to my Goodreads TBR and I'll get to them when I get to them. The books aren't going anywhere. They're not going away. Whether I read them this year or I read them in 10 years, they will still be there. And just really not overwhelming myself so much. So that is one of my big goals for 2026. Just kind of remembering that, reading doesn't have to look the same every year. Just because I read 80 books this year doesn't mean I have to read more or less than that next year. It just kind of is what it is, especially if, and I hope that it will, my writing will continue the way that it will. Next year, given that Nick will be on dialysis, he's now on dialysis, but he will probably be on dialysis for at least part of the year, hopefully not too long. That means I will be home a lot more, so that is more reading and writing time that I will have. So hopefully that will kind of bump up those numbers a bit. But yeah, I'm just kind of gonna go with the flow and let things happen as they will and kind of control what I can as far as how many books I'm checking out and that kind of thing, and really getting to my physical TBR. That is really a goal for me in the coming year. So yeah, that is it. That is my little wrap up for my reading for 2025. Thank you guys so much for being here with me, for listening to me yap and talk about books for a little bit. I really, really appreciate you guys, and I will see you in the next one.